Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our March webinar. Our virtual webinar series is going strong here in 2021. We are on our final iteration of our Career Bootcamp webinar series. So today we're going to tackle the topic of interviewing techniques. So we are looking forward to that. We'll start kind of with a little bit of an agenda so you know what we're going to cover today. So I'll kind of give you a preview into who I am and a little bit about Athletico. We're then going to share about our values. We're going to go over just the interview basics, how to really prepare. The whole kind of key component of today is how to prepare for your interviews in advance. And we're going to talk a lot about that. We're then going to talk about some company research and really getting ready for that interview day, and then also some COVID-19 adjustments. Additionally, at the end, we will have you submit any questions that you have for me, and I will tackle those at the end. So kind of be thinking through, and you can just submit those directly on the chat there. Okay, and so to start, wanted to share a little bit about me, so you kind of know who you're talking to right now. So my name is Molly King. If you've been with us for our January and February series, you've seen this and you know me. So welcome back. Super happy to have you here. But if you're new, my name is Molly King. I'm our campus recruiting manager at Athletico. I've been with the organization for several months. And really, I love my job. I'm able to connect students to different opportunities here at Athletico and really kind of connect them to finding their first job. That's the goal here. So wanted to highlight, if you are interested in learning a little bit more about Athletico, you can join us at athletico.com/careers, and there we'll have the latest news and updates. And then additionally, any questions can be directed to collegerelations@athletico.com. And then also just check out our social media site for any kind of future webinar news and any events that we have going on. So a little bit about Athletico. So if you, and again, if you're new, so founded in 1991, which means we're coming up on 30 years of being in business, which we're very excited and honored to have honestly been serving our communities for 30 years. So we have over 5,000 employees, and we have over 500 facilities in 12 states, serving our physical therapy patients, occupational therapy, athletic training. So those really are our kind of key services with a variety of different specialty programs as well. So it's a little bit about Athletico. I always want to highlight our core values, as this is really honestly the hallmark of our culture. So these values are so important and are really one of the most, my favorite things about working here at Athletico. They're at the center of our decision making. They're really connected to our purpose and drive our day-to-day work here at Athletico. Okay, so let's dive into the interview process. So to start here, really, the interview process is, kind of looking at the whole selection process from, meeting an employer to actually getting and landing the job and starting. We're kind of in the middle here. So where that orange star is. So the recruiting process can really depend on the position. There may be 2 to 4 different interviews, maybe starting with a recruiter or someone you meet on campus like me, and then really kind of ending with maybe that hiring manager or various other interview members that are part of the interview there. So in today's tips, and really kind of our focus here, is to highlight tips for that screening or that interview stage. A lot of them can be used for really either that phone screen, but we're really going to be talking about kind of a live, maybe a second round or third round interview, and whether that's live or that's over Zoom. Again, we're going to talk about, I think, COVID and maybe how that has changed that as well. So we started our webinar series back in January with the resume techniques. And then in February, we kind of followed up with how to succeed in a virtual career fair environment and what to anticipate at a virtual career fair. And we now understand that a lot of our student population is kind of wrapping up their, I guess, period of career fairs and are moving into interviews. So we wanted to provide you with some interviewing techniques and tips to help you succeed there. So one thing you're going to hear me talk about a lot today is preparation. And so a successful interview is going to hinge largely on your preparation. And I really loved this quote here. So one important key to success is self-confidence. An important key to self-confidence is preparation by Arthur Ashe. I thought that really kind of hit home as to what we're trying to drive here today. Even if you are someone who can wing things, you are a last minute person, you are a procrastinator, those who are able to pull like all-nighters and stay up, I'm talking to you. You don't want to do that for an interview. It can be a highly stressful situation, and you want to do everything that you can to be cool, calm, collected, and show up live on the interview day feeling comfortable and ready to go. It really does make sense to begin preparing as soon as you know you have an interview. So if you have maybe a phone screen, or if you are in the phone screen process and now you have a live interview, you want to prepare really as soon as you can, but definitely 1 to 2 weeks in advance. Again, preparing 1 to 2 weeks out will help you feel cool, calm, collected, and will give you the self-confidence that you need to succeed in the interview. Today, we'll cover really these things here: doing your homework, anticipating the interview questions, knowing your resume, and then also we'll kind of comment on day of, dressing for success, arriving early and distraction-free so that you can really be focused, lasered in on the conversation and for the interview. Okay, so starting with, you have an interview coming up. The first thing, the first piece of preparation, I believe, is that company research. So we would definitely recommend spending a few hours learning really everything you can about the company. So from as many different resources and sources as you can. So you want to talk with friends and contacts. If you have maybe a contact that you met at a career fair, reaching back out to them, reading current news, releases, articles, and yes, spending a lot of time on Google, kind of figuring out everything you can about the organization that you're interviewing with. Often candidates can just simply look at the info a company is pushing out, like on their website. And I'm going to talk about that. I think it's really important to look at the company's website. But you also want to, look at social media. You also want to look at any news articles. Again, that holistic research to provide you a great understanding of the company and what others are saying about the organization. And by doing this, you just get a larger picture of the company. So it'll also help in another way too, as you're kind of going through the interviewing process and nearing the end of the interview, you will typically almost always have the opportunity to ask questions back to the interviewer. And this research here on the company is going to help prepare you for those interview questions. So generally your questions should not be things that you find on the internet. So, hey, like how many, do you have a clinic in Detroit, Michigan? Or how long have you been open? Those are maybe examples of questions that I wouldn't necessarily love to see in an interview. And so actually doing the research on those things will help prepare you to go deeper in those interview questions. And not only is this type of research going to ensure that you sound competent and that you're asking the right questions, it's also going to help you understand if this is indeed the right company for you to pursue. And although it's cliche, it may sound cheesy, you are interviewing the organization just as much as they are interviewing you. So what matters to you, and is this a match? Something to evaluate as you go through the recruiting process here. The next type of research, or the next type of preparation, is really getting ready to anticipate those interview questions. And this is going to take some introspection, some thinking, kind of, and maybe some time just alone with you to really kind of go through these 4 different things here. So number 1 is knowing your why. And this is, you are definitely not going to be, every single interview that you are going to be in is going to ask you some sort of why question. So why do you want to be a physical therapist? Why do you want to work in marketing? If that's what you want to pursue. But you have to know why you want to pursue the profession. For me, a lot of times it's an opener. It's really kind of setting the stage for how I'm going to hear about the student or the candidate's experiences. So why is this profession right for you? Why is this company right for you? And why are you the right candidate? So kind of thinking through that why is going to be critical. Additionally, recognizing your strengths. So what are you good at? What makes you stand out? What are you known for? What is your reputation? All interviews, in some way, are you sharing your strengths and you speaking about your past accomplishments? This may be, a direct question. What are your strengths? But even thinking through this is going to help set you up for those behavioral-based interview questions that we'll cover quickly here. And it's going to help you frame the answer correctly. Understanding your weaknesses may be a little bit less fun than the first two, but what are the obstacles that you've faced, mistakes you've made? What are things that you're working on as a professional or as a student? We're all growing, we're all evolving, and it's critical that we kind of know what we are working towards. So having a goal in mind of what you're working on will help prepare you for an interview. And then lastly is anticipate the job description details. So again, looking at that job description and matching up where your skill set is going to align with the organization or the position's needs. As we kind of think through, again, that preparation, we always want to be tying that job description back to our experiences. So kind of moving and kind of thinking through more of the preparation here. It is, actually taking the job description details and then what questions could be asked about those specific skills and kind of backing into your answer that way. So definitely you want to kind of trial out some sample questions there. And then you also want to really participate in any sort of mock interviews or any sort of practice. We know practice makes perfect. Athletico actually hosts several of these. And then also your school might also host mock interviews. And if you don't have access to a formal mock interview where you kind of practice, you go through the questions and then get formal feedback, you can even spend time with a friend and say, hey, friend, can you review these questions with me? And then the worst case scenario, if you don't have a friend, I'm sorry, but if the worst case scenario is for you to even just record yourself. So a lot is going to be revealed to you. It's one thing to say your answers in your head, but it's another thing to get them out and to speak them out loud. So would definitely recommend any sort of practice or mock interviewing that's possible. Now that you've kind of done the introspective work, you've thought about your why, you know your strengths, you know your skills, we'll discuss next really how to prepare those answers for behavioral-based interviews using the STAR method. So the STAR method, this is the next step in your preparation, is fully understanding and deploying the skills of the STAR method. So prepare to be asked a couple different times about when you used a specific skill in the past. This is typical in most interviews, and it's sometimes called behavioral-based interview questions. And you will use the STAR method here to really tell a clear story about really the situation, task, action, and result. And we'll walk through that. So using the STAR strategy or the STAR method, you can make sure you're fully addressing the interview's question while also demonstrating how you were able to overcome previous challenges and be successful. So S in the STAR, we're going to set the scene. So we're setting the stage for the story by sharing context around the situation or challenge that you faced. So in most instances, it's best to describe relevant work situations, but really kind of depending on what you've done or what you've been active in on campus, you can also look to transferable skills like with volunteer work, any sort of academic projects, working in a team project, any sort of clinical work would be a great opportunity to share this. Kind of thinking through our clinical ed students, like a patient that they've seen, setting up the stage of that. So it's also really imperative that you talk about a specific instance rather than just in general, I provide manual therapy, or just in general, I provide marketing services or whatever. So you really want to get specific there. You're then, for task, going to describe your responsibility or role in the situation or challenge. In other words, you're really going to kind of discuss the goal or task that was set out for you. A for action, you're then going to explain specific actions that you took to handle the situation or overcome the challenge. This part of your answer requires the most in-depth description, as this is really kind of what the interviewer is honing in on. What did you do? As that will largely indicate if you're a fit for the role or not. So definitely spend time there and be specific. One other thing too, that I've seen or heard in students before is a lot of times it's common to hear kind of the language "we" as a team. And actually, when I was early on in my career, I was, interviewing, and I, wanted to be humble and speak to like, my team's amazing, and this is what we did, and this is what we accomplished. And I was using that term "we" rather than "I" a lot. And a lot of times interviewers are thinking to themselves, okay, great. Well, then what did Molly actually do when she's saying "we"? Was she just, maybe she did a little piece of it, or she was leading the team? So really speaking and just using "I" versus "we", it may not be kind of the language that you're maybe currently using, but we do in an interview want to get down to very specifically what you did to help shape or change the outcome of a situation. Lastly, what is the outcome? What did you learn? What are the takeaways? This is critical because this is really where you had any sort of learnings or any key takeaways that will shape your behavior in the future. So that's the STAR method. This may be familiar to you. Maybe it's not familiar to you, but wanted to definitely cover that, as it's really the right structure for setting up your interview answers there. Okay, great. So now we've prepared, we have all of our, questions, we've thought through our why, we've understood why we're interviewing for the position, we've reviewed our STAR method, and now we're at the interview. Prior to this, we want to think back too of being on time, dressing appropriately. Again, if this is live, a live interview, but even if it is virtual, understanding that what looks good on camera and what and taking the professionalism high, even if you still are on camera there. Now you're prepared, you're ready to interview. And so really the first thing is your first impression. So being confident, kind of coming into a conversation with confidence, presenting a strong smile and a greeting. Again, if this is over Zoom, that is not going to be handshaking, or if it's live, kind of think through, even with COVID, if a handshake makes sense. It may not make sense right now, but elbow bump or whatever it is, but a strong greeting really just sets the tone for your enthusiasm for the role and for the conversation to come. Next, kind of thinking through quality of answer. So you've started the actual interview. We want you to be thorough, but with relevant details. It can be easy for some to quickly kind of get through things and move on because they're nervous. Or on another hand, some students or some candidates will they'll ramble a little bit because perhaps they're nervous or they're trying to wrap it up. So, being thorough, again, kind of thinking back to that STAR method, giving the details that matter. We're really looking for relevancy rather than just like, here's your, whole career and every detail and every manager you've had. You kind of want to be succinct there. Rely on your preparation. You've done that. You've done all of that thinking, all of that introspection to prepare for this time. And so relying on that preparation. Professionalism is key. So this is something I personally always am noticing when I'm interviewing students is how are they speaking about the others around them? We kind of talked through the I versus the we, but avoiding negative statements about your previous company, even if you had a bad experience, honestly, even if it wasn't, the right position for you, how do you frame it so that you're professional, courteous? That's important. I've left some interviews before where I'm the interviewer and I've been interviewing a student, and I think back and almost everything they said was negative, and what's odd sometimes is sometimes even people can be, jolly or jovial or, warm, and they can be smiling. But then if everything they say is negative, they dislike this, I'll ask them why they are entering PT, and they say, oh, it's because I didn't like all the other things. And it's then you leave and you're like, oh goodness, like they might be a negative person, so kind of thinking through, just avoiding those negative statements about your previous company and about really those kind of details there. And then also just the interview flow. So taking cues from your interviewer, hopefully you know how long the interview is going to be. If you just have a 20-minute quick interview, or 30 minutes, you don't want to spend the first 12 minutes giving a whole spiel about you and your background. You want to kind of keep it punchy, but also take cues from them if they're moving on. And then that last point, staying engaged and be conversational when appropriate. Sometimes interviews can be a little bit kind of like a volleyball, like back and forth of, question and answer, but then there's times to pause and ask clarifying questions or share details. So just kind of be thinking about kind of how the interviewer is leading, and then also breathe and pause when needed. So again, pausing for me will help if I am rambling or I'm not, speaking enough. So want to speak, just definitely want to just encourage you to breathe and take pause whenever needed there. Okay, so now we've kind of talked through what you're saying, but now let's talk about how you say it. So posture, sitting up straight and tall, that displays confidence, and also your body language. So it's not only just the things that you think of when you think of nonverbal, your hand gestures, and we'll talk about that, but it's even, your pitch, blinking. Who would think that that's something you'd think about? But I have been in interviews where I'm like, oh my goodness, they're blinking 100 miles a minute. And, and is it nerves or what is it? But personal presentation, facial expressions, do you normally have kind of like a, warm, soft smile, or do you look angry when you're not speaking? So just thinking through all of those things. And this next slide here will kind of reveal, I think, the critical things for an interview, but to avoid fidgeting. So you want to present a composed demeanor and should do so by sitting upright, minimal movement, and really strong posture. Those in our physical therapy world kind of know what that looks like and hopefully can speak to that. But hand gestures, movements as hand gestures can be used strategically, to add emphasis or answers. But you don't want to be using your hands too much, as that can become distracting. And then your eye contact. I really think you should be aiming to be making eye contact about 70% of the interview. You don't want to be staring, looking in someone's eyes the entire time, but looking away, looking up, or looking down, or never making eye contact would display to me that you're nervous, you maybe lack the self-confidence. So definitely making, kind of targeting that 70% of the interview for eye contact there. Okay, then at the end, you're going to wrap up the interview. You've nailed it. You've done the preparation. You've flowed through the interview, but you're really going to ask questions. So asking insightful questions at the end of an interview is a great way to show interest in working for the company. We would recommend probably preparing 3 to 5 to ask the interviewer that pertain to the position, the organization, the office environment, culture. And the beautiful thing about this kind of Q&A session is it's twofold. It both shows your interest in the organization and actually confirms your interest in them. So if you have questions and you're trying to understand, is this the right fit for me? Asking those questions is going to help that, but it's also going to help you show your interest in the organization. Again, these are things that cannot easily be found. They should be questions that cannot easily be found on the internet. So kind of thinking back to those very obvious things with a quick Google search. Definitely don't, you don't want to waste your time essentially by if you have the employer or you have the hiring manager, you really want to get to know them, and the position and the organization, and you don't want to spend time on those things. I kind of listed out a couple things, a couple questions that have been some of my favorites. I love when candidates ask what success would look like in this role. So what do they need to be successful? Because really that is, write down those answers, because that is, honestly going to be critical to your success if you are hired in. For a growing organization like Athletico, growing quickly, expanding, asking about that. What are plans for growth? What is next for Athletico? I love kind of hearing those questions. And then researching online or anything in the news. So if there's anything kind of relevant, like if we went through an acquisition or merged with another company or anything like that, asking about how that has impacted the role or impacted the business. Those are things I think are great questions. And then lastly, this is a common question I hear now: how has COVID-19 impacted your business? And I think it's a very fair and honest question to ask, as we know it has, really impacted every single person on the planet and in every business. So how was it a pivot in services? Was it a pivot in style, culture? So definitely something to ask about. And with that, it kind of helps. Just the last thing that we did that we wanted to hit on was COVID-19 adjustments. We want you to feel comfortable, especially if you're interviewing with Athletico or other companies. We really want you to feel comfortable. So if you're not comfortable, speak up. Again, kind of shaking hands. Just kind of wait and see what happens when you get to the interview, and if that's a thing, and you're able to use your hand sanitizer, or you're able to, kind of pass if you're not comfortable with that. And then also when it comes to virtual interview adjustments, so using a professional like Zoom background, bright lights, you want your audio, you don't want distractions in the background. We don't want any background noise, good lighting, and a strong internet if you are conducting the interview via Zoom. So those are just some things. Again, we want you to have comfort with that. So wanted to see if there was any questions from the audience. If you'd like to ask any questions, now would be the time. And if there are no questions, that's totally fine. Okay, yep, we have a question that came in from Amy. So, hey, Amy, do you feel it is appropriate to ask for a timeline in the hiring process? Totally. That is something that is going to be critical to you. It's critical to your success in understanding, okay, I'm now in this interview. Are there 6 more interviews? Is this the last one? I would typically save that question for your recruiter. So a lot of times you're interviewing maybe first with your recruiter and then maybe second with the hiring manager. Your recruiter is going to be totally in the know on what's happening with the process. So if that's not covered at the end, asking about the next steps, feel free to circle back with your recruiter and just say, hey, curious what the next steps are. And that term, kind of next steps, is very commonly used in this industry and others. Awesome. We have one more question. This is from Jordan. What is a good way to approach a question about pay? Wow. Provocative question. I love that. Thanks, Jordan. So usually, and this is the case, I guess, really at the beginning at the very beginning of kind of the recruiting process, your recruiter should be kind of talking a little bit about kind of compensation and setting any sort of expectations there, asking what your salary expectation is. Again, we're always asking about your expectation, not about your current pay. That's not something that we ask. So approaching a question about pay, hopefully it's already kind of covered for you. And if it's clear, if not, it's something that you could definitely talk with about your recruiter. So they would be the expert into kind of our salary ranges and what makes sense. So if you feel like you have not heard anything about it and you're now in your final round, definitely just say, hey, that's something that you could ask your recruiter, and they may be able to provide you with ranges or even ask you about your expectation to ensure that there is alignment there. So great question. Definitely important. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining today. Awesome questions here. And this is a critical topic of how to interview and kind of feeling prepared. Anything else, you can always reach out to collegerelations@athletico.com. And then I also wanted to highlight our upcoming webinars. So in April, we have our NPTE study tips and tricks. So that's going to be April 30th. We're actually bringing in a panel of some of our new hires to speak to their studying techniques. May 21st is career considerations. This is, again, the philosophy about what should you be considering as you approach your first job and you approach your career. And then June 25th, defining your personal brand. Topic I'm passionate about. Again, this can all be at athletico.com/2021 student webinar series. Again, email us if you need anything, but I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend and a great Friday. Thank you.